Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back into the Buster Show podcast. Today, we have a very special guest, and that is because we have one of the pillars of one of the greatest dynasties in the history of sports on the show, Mr. Jerry West. How are you?
Good morning. How are you?
Doing fantastic. The first question I wanted to ask you is now in your life today, what gets you the most excited? What gets your gears spinning the same way, that it did when you were playing a championship game?
Well, I think that all of us have loves in our lives. And one, I've had a long-standing love in my life from a personal perspective, something that has always driven me, being competitive. Some people, as they age and, kind of take a different perspective in their lives, they lose that a little bit. And I've been fortunate enough to still be involved in the league for so many years. And when I go to the game, I have a kind of routine like I did as a player, even when I go to the game today. And we played tonight against a very good Memphis team, and we're supposed to have one of their star players back, Jaren Jackson, who has played all year. And we played last night in Portland. And I wonder how these players are going to react tonight. Are we going to come ready to play? We've had a lot of people in and out of our lineup, as a bunch of teams have had. And, I'm wondering, how our coach will make adjustments. This is how my mind works, even to this day. And I think along the way, the things you learn, you always want to complete the season successfully. But to me, the most important thing is trying to prepare your team for next year. What do you need next year to make your team better? So even though you're staying kind of in the moment of the season, there's always a thought for what's going to go on in the future.
Right. No, it's so interesting to hear you, talk in a very similar way to how every player talks about their team. Do you ever wake up in the morning, before the Clippers have a big game these days and think, just for a second, oh, I gotta go to the gym and get some shots up?
No. I'm not, those shooting days are over. I think if I touch a basketball, I'd break out in a rash. I think everyone would probably who played with me probably say he shot too much then.
That's funny. So I want to ask now, obviously, one of the byproducts of winning a lot is celebrating a lot. You played with a lot of very fun people, Wilt Chamberlain included. What did a celebration for a championship or something like that look like back then?
Well, we didn't win. We only won once. We got in the finals 9 times and only won once. And unfortunately, our celebrations were of sorrow. What could we have done different? I've often said there's more stories in a losing locker room there are in a winning locker room. All you hear is praise, and they don't see the torment that goes on in a visitor's locker room that has lost or a winning team. The mood is completely different. The toll of a regular season, and then it's like you start the season and it's going to be a marathon. You get to the playoff, it's going to be a sprint. And sometimes you lose by a step, sometimes you lose by five steps. And every once in a while, and especially in my career, we had a big lead and we won the race. But the stories, the sadness, how you feel after the season's over, you just feel worthless because people say, well, what do you play for? Well, actually, you play for a couple things. You play for the city you're in, and particularly in cities which really embrace professional teams, and also you play for the people you're playing with, the people who work for an organization. You play for them. So it's not something that goes away very quickly. It makes you angry. You have all this range of emotions, and everyone will say, well, you were one of the last 2 teams standing. Well, that's not good enough. That's not good enough, because I think people are conditioned to win, and some people, let's face it, are more competitive than others.
I think we all know which one you are of those two. um, but all that said, I think it's so fascinating because when you look at what I associate that final championship with, just as a fan, is for baseball they got all the champagne, basketball they have all the champagne, and then when the people who are working on staff realize they're not going to win, they take it out of the locker room, all the cameras leave, and in that losing locker room, there's no media, there's no photographers, they're all in the winning locker room. And I wish that there were more people capturing those losing moments, because those being documented, I feel like that's a lot more motivating to see somebody go from that to the championship rather than just win. Do you share that?
Well, oh, for sure. As I mentioned to you, the thing that's really difficult is you play the whole regular season, okay, to prove that you're one of the best teams, and you get in. Let's say you get in the finals, regardless of where it is, football, World Series, hockey, basketball. You're playing the seventh and final game to determine who's the championship. And I just want you to imagine the emotion in the locker room for each team that's playing for a championship. And sometimes you can go out there and have players really lay eggs, can't catch the ball, can't shoot it. People always use the word, well, they were too nervous or they choked, right? I don't believe that. I don't believe that. I think sometimes destiny plays a huge part of it. Ball bouncing a certain way for you. Effort will sometimes even that out if your effort's good. But at the end of the day, someone's going to lose and someone's not going to lose. But can you imagine playing one game to decide a whole season, one game to decide a whole playoff? Almost doesn't seem fair.
No, I wouldn't fare very well in March Madness.
Oh yeah. Well, March Madness is going to be, there's going to be going forward, there's going to be a lot of smaller schools winning it for a lot of reasons, but one in particular, the kids stay in school longer. If there are these power schools who used to be able to dominate the country anymore, kids are not going for that anymore. They're going to go for a chance where they get a play right away and maybe not even go out of state, play for their home university.
Totally.
And I think you're going to see more in that, more and more of that. But you're going to see these mid majors because very rarely do they have a kid that leaves school early. Very rarely, and they get coached for 4 years. The coaches at these mid major schools are terrific, and they build a program by going out and recruiting kids that no one else really looks at that much. So there's an incredible amount of loyalty for these kids who go there, get an opportunity to play, but they can see themselves get better every year. But more importantly, they do play as a team. And it's fun to play on a team and not with a bunch of individuals. And a lot of times when these young kids get out there, coaches coach them, but at the end of the day, their talent is so enormous. And the only thing preventing them from being professional players is just probably age. And so they go to school for 1 year and they're gone. And how can you be as good as you were if you'd stay in school at least 2 years? If there's one rule I'd like to see changed, I think kids should go to school for 2 years and then come out. I think it would benefit both them and the professional game. But I've often said, if you can get killed in a war at 18 years of age, why can't you go and pursue your dreams, whatever they may be in life?
I mean, it's totally true. They should definitely have that opportunity. And I think also, regardless of whether the NBA allows it or not, there are so many more opportunities now available because of, these kids already being worldwide known superstars by the time they graduate high school, some of the best of the best. So the opportunities that they're presented with, now as well, are things that didn't even exist when guys like LeBron were coming out of high school.
Well, as I say, that was a unique time. Excuse me. That was a unique time for all young high school kids if they were good enough. But it was at that point in time, it was almost always people were interested in the taller players. But if you look at the change in the game, all these kids that are 6'5", 6'7", I call them intermediate sized players. And also the rules have dictated an enormous change in the way the game is played. It's designed for offense. Defensively, I wish they'd let the coaches do a little bit more defensively, but you can't touch players. The rules have been very lax, and it's simply because people like to see home runs. They like to see strikeouts in baseball. In basketball, they like to see scoring. And with the skill of these kids today, particularly off the dribble and their ability to shoot shots, you just can't touch anyone today. And so there's so much more easy to score today. Puts so much more stress on the defenses, and I wish we would allow defensive players at all levels to play a little bit more aggressive than they do today.
Totally. Now, you're somebody who's had a really good eye over a very long period of time for finding and selecting talent before they're, huge. When you look at the game and you think about the game, how much of it do you think is physical versus mental? And are you looking at how they're thinking about the game from a mental standpoint as much as what they're able to do on the court when you're picking these guys at 19, 20, 21?
Well, there's a couple of skills that people don't even think about. Hard work is probably the greatest skill for any player to have enormous success, even for the average person in all walk of life. You can have all kind of knowledge. You can have, you can talk about it. You can do it. But if you don't work hard enough, you're never going to accomplish any goals that you set for yourself. But if you take a player who's got unique skills, and I heard you say the word superstars. There's not that many superstars in basketball. Everyone's a superstar. That's not true. It's probably 5 maybe in the NBA. There are a bunch of all-star players, but there's a major difference between a superstar and an all-star, a major difference. And one of the things that superstars do, they seem to attract the attention of people. They draw more people. Where an all-star player, you'll have a few fans, but the emphasis in this league is so much on the talent of these players and unique talent that they have, but the way they play the game. You watch Steph Curry, who's like oh my goodness, he's like an oddball in today's game because of his ability to make shots from anywhere and his incredible accuracy and the joy he has in the game. Then you watch LeBron James, you watch Giannis, you watch Kevin Durant. Those players, they just have it all. And what is it? They see the game differently than the average player. They see the game in slow motion. They don't make the same mistakes over and over. They're incredible teammates, all of them, because they play the total game. They pass the ball. They're not selfish. And this to me is what comprises a superstar. And you put people around them, you can put very average players around them, but pretty soon they're going to get better. Just following their habits, watching how they play the game, but more importantly, watch what they put into the game every night physically. And mentally, they'll always just play ahead. So your mind, your instincts, that's a gift. You can't work on that. You can work harder and harder and harder. But to get to that level, you have to have a special gift. And there's a few players that have it, and the rest of them are lacking that one particular element. And we have some wonderful players in this league that are really, really good. But there's something that everyone would probably trade their best player if they could find one of those really unique players that does things that other people don't seem to do, and they inspire their teammates along the way.
What do you think that thing is? Is it just another level of motivation, or
No.
What do you think it is?
Absolutely not. It's a gift. It's a gift. If you can, and again, one of the things I always felt I had an advantage. I always thought I knew what everyone was doing before they're going to do it. Now, you may not be because they're gifted enough to get to them and bother them, but over the course of the game, you're going to get them to make mistakes. You're going to get them to make mistakes, and just hopeful it's in the right part of the game. And if throw a careless pass, you'll pick it off. And usually passes are made in the open court, and cross-court passes, they're going to be layups. It might be a three-point shot today because they'll run down 4-on-1 and some guy will shoot a three-point shot instead of having a layup. So even the thinking of the game has changed enormously today, and coaches embrace it. And that's why we're seeing an influx of much better shooters, uh, players who are really gifted handling the ball, moving the ball. Um, and they start so early today. They have so much information on their hands, so much shooting information. They have all of these basketball camps, AEU camps, tournaments all summer. Most of these kids, when they come into the league, they know each other from playing against each other a number of times when they're teenagers.
Totally. Do you think though that there is too much, fraternizing in the NBA today? Are guys too friendly because of social media and off-court friendships and relationships?
I would never talk to anyone. I didn't. I didn't want to talk to the players. I didn't even want to shake their hand for a game. I just thought it. I thought it was disrespectful. I always had great respect for the players I played against, and more importantly, I just thought it was something I didn't. Why shake hands with the enemy who wants to kill you? You should want to kill them first.
So you look at it like it's a war rather than, a basketball game.
Absolutely, it is a war.
Yeah.
It is a war. If you would, I've likened it to, people were always looking for motivational things. I think the greatest motivation comes from within. I really do. And the ones that are self-motivated, the coach doesn't have to get up and make some kind of a speech that's going to rouse the room. I hated when coaches did that. I didn't want to hear them. I just wanted to go play because all that stuff in my mind had already been thought out. And by playing against these players for a number of times, you have to sort of have a catalog in your mind of what they did and what they didn't do. But the end of the day, I was very self-motivated. And today, it's just a much easier world for them. Everything they need to be a better player is there for them if they want to work at it. And a lot of people, particularly older players, oh, I wish I'd had this. It's not the case, okay? It's not the case. Forget it. We served our time when we played. It certainly wasn't the best of circumstances, both from a travel standpoint and from a health standpoint, because we just didn't have what they have today, the resources, and more importantly, the resources to learn how to get better. Teaching aids, people to work with you individually. I mean, if in summer sometimes when getting close to training camp, I might want to go shoot somewhere. I'd have to chase every ball that I shot if I missed it. And so what it makes you do is not want to miss. And so you get to the point, and actually I know it sounds crazy and probably people think it sounds insane, but sometimes when you're shooting balls the right way, the ball will come out and it'll sort of bounce back to you, so you don't have to chase it all over the place.
Well, if you hit the back of the rim, right? Because then it sort of rolls along the bottom of the net.
If you can't shoot the ball straight, you're never going to be a great shooter. And shooting the ball straight and using your legs and having the right proper technique and learning how to shoot difficult shots from different positions. All of those things were stuff that I used to practice on my own. No one showed me how to do it. But I tried like crazy to be able to find a way to make shooting more difficult. So you had to shoot it straighter, had to have the right arc. I used to practice shooting the ball 2 or 3 different heights all the time, different release points. But again, everyone plays these little mind games. When you're playing mind games, they're important for you, they're important for yourself, and they're important for the person that's doing it to get better. You have to challenge yourself even when you're by yourself.
Totally. So somebody like Michael Jordan, right? He is famous for doing this thing. I call it manufactured motivation, where he would make stories up just to get himself motivated. Like he would say that somebody said something to him that they never said just to get him hyped up. Do you believe in that sort of thing, or do you think it has to sort of come from within?
You know what? I know Michael pretty well, and and we've talked about things like that. But I don't think there's any question that if you're a great, great player, and certainly I'm not sure we've seen a player like him in my lifetime because of his impressive play on both ends of the court. He was arguably, well, I don't think he arguably, he was the best offensive player and the best defensive player in the league. We haven't seen that before. And but the competitive nature of Michael was just unique. And if there's someone that was sort of a challenge to him in terms of, talking about the best player in the league, um, he was going to prove that that wasn't the case. And also he was going to lead his team. He was just a fierce competitor, but physically, I'm not sure we've seen a package like that. The quickness, the lateral quickness, the vertical, the running, gigantic hands, being able to do things in the air that we see very well. We haven't really seen anyone do like him.
Totally. So I had Walt Clyde Frazier on the podcast, and I asked him, whether it was possible even to compare eras, and he essentially said not really. But I'm curious, do you share that? Can we even compare players from different eras, or is it impossible because of how much was different?
Well, it's really impossible. Okay. And I sort of liken when I played, when I came into the league, it was start of people being much more athletic. And I was fortunate I was very athletic. I could run and jump. And, um, and even when I first came into the league, even though I didn't start right away, and I was the second player taken in the draft, I could just see from playing a few minutes that if I had any kind of patience and if the coach would have any kind of confidence in me, that I was going to be able to do well in this league. Performance-wise, I wasn't concerned that I was going to be someone who was and also ran. I just felt that I had a chance if I would continue to work at it and continue to be motivated, that I was going to be a player that was going to be productive in this league. And I was fortunate. I played with a great, great player in Elgin Baylor. And I think one of the greatest compliments I've ever had, and it's awkward. I don't even enjoy talking about myself, to be honest with you, but they called him Mr. Inside and me Mr. Outside. Well, to be a scorer in this league, you just can't shoot shots. You got to have the ability to make people foul you, get to the free throw line. That's how you score a lot of points. It's just not shooting the ball. You've got to get to the free throw line. And it was an incredible learning experience for me. To every year I'd come back more confident after my rookie year. And after that, I think in my career, I made the All-Pro team 11 times, even with injuries that maybe robbed me a couple more times. But it was a great learning experience to play with someone like him, who was one of the greatest people I've ever met and an enormously gifted basketball player. But he was a perfect teammate. Perfect.
That's amazing. I love that. When you look back, at some of your former teammates, are there any, not even necessarily pertaining to basketball, but are there any big life lessons that just stick out like a sore thumb to you, in terms of things that you've picked up along the way from some of those guys in terms of, being a happier person?
Well, I wouldn't exactly say I'm a happier person. I've never, I've battled depression in my life. It's pretty well documented. And the smallest things made me feel good. If I'd go out and play games that, maybe some other people weren't capable of at that point in their lives, I felt good about it if we won. If we lost, it meant nothing. And I bet probably the best lesson I think I've ever learned in my life is when I was growing up. When I grew up, there wasn't much hope. People went to high school, they got married and had kids, and they worked for the coal mines. That's not who I was at all. My mind was not like that. I could have never worked in a coal mine. And somewhere along the way, I was given a gift and kind of a determination to try to live my dreams. And I was a dreamer. I still am a dreamer. I still believe in goal setting. Goals have to be a lot more successful. I mean, a lot more um, hmm, flexible today than ever before because of dynamics, the way the world has changed. But I remember as a kid that I'd build these old basketball things and I'd put them up on the side of a tree or something like that. And they weren't very pretty, but they at least had a hoop. And I would go out there and play all these mind games. And I could tell myself that I was going to make a last second shot. I could miss it 10 times and find a way to put a second back on the shot clock and make a shot. I also learned one thing really well, that because the places I shot the ball from, they weren't conventional courts. And everyone said, oh, you shot the ball in the snow. And people almost want to laugh at it, but it happens a lot to kids, and particularly in isolated areas. And it's basketball. You can learn everything about basketball. It's such a solitary sport. You don't need other people to participate. You can learn almost everything that you need to learn. Dribbling the ball, passing the ball. You can pass the ball off the board to yourself. You can pass off a tree to yourself if that be the case. And you can also learn how to shoot the ball if your fundamentals are good. But you do need some kind of a touch. But if you don't have fundamentals, you can't do that in the first place. But that's something that I was a dreamer, and I can't tell you in my life how many times I dreamed about making a last second shot, and I made a lot of them in my career. And I'd have writers to ask me how that happened. Well, I said I've done it a million times, and they would sort of laugh about it and didn't really ask me anything about it. But when I was out there playing by myself and no one liked to play basketball, the area I was on, football and baseball were the two big sports. I would go out there and I would not leave until I made 2 or 3 shots at one game. I was the coach, I was the announcer, I was a referee, and also was timekeeper. That was the most important thing, being the timekeeper. I could always manage to put mentally a second or two on the shot clock. But when I came to Los Angeles and first came here, all the fans were from New York, rooting for the Knicks. And we had an announcer, a very famous announcer, Chick Hearn, who probably, he started the craze of basketball with his bird's eye view of the game. And he nicknamed me Mr. Clutch. That's what he nicknamed me, Mr. Clutch.
Pretty good nickname.
And it was kind of ironic because that stuck with me through my life. But I made a lot of last second shots, and something that really was thrilling to do it. And frankly, I've never really elaborated on that very much. But the reason why was because I did that as a kid. It would give me something to feel good when I went home, when I did not know what was going to happen in my house.
Yeah. That being the timekeeper is incredibly underrated. It's an underrated job.
Well, you watch how many times in basketball games today, and even with a tenth of a second up there, the kids dribble out the shot clock because they're not aware of it. But I'd close my eyes and I'd try to replicate a second, 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004, 1005, just to get where it was 3 seconds, 5 seconds, and to try to do that in my mind. And listen, I was a little guy. I was 10, 11 years old. It was a feel-good thing. And sometimes there's a writer that Ann Didion, who's very famous, she said something was really amazing one time. She said, people tell themselves stories in order to live. Well, I told myself a lot of stories in my life to make me feel good about myself. And when the world around me seemed like it was crumbling.
Right. Totally. No, and it's funny, I grew up in New York City, so I didn't have full-size courts when I was super young, but I used to do the same thing on my mini hoops. I would, oh, they added 3 seconds to the clock, steps back, hits the shot, and they win. Wow, all those sorts of things. It's so fun. But you're definitely a true testament as to if you believe it and then put the work in, you can accomplish anything. And I think the fact that you're able to do that then is unbelievable because of how much easier it is to do now. And I think that's sort of one of the great takeaways from people, extraordinary people like yourself who did it. Anybody can do anything, and I know you're a believer of that, but it sounds like dreaming is a huge part of that for you.
I would tell you that one of the other things, just people just living a life, you're going to run into a lot of walls, and if you're willing to give up, you're probably going to be an average person. I don't think going up, I would always, with anyone who would come and ask me questions about, how I can get here. I said, look, if you want to give up after you've hit a wall, I said, you can't do that. I said, it takes a lot of failure. And in my case, losing, winning a ton during the regular season, I've led the league in assists. I've led the league in scoring. I was an all defensive team when they didn't even, late in my career. Almost everything individually I accomplished, but winning championships was the thing that have always left a lot of scars on me, and I was much more successful being involved with teams that were great teams that were winning championships. And even though everyone's they always want to give credit to the front office, you can. And it's important to understand that front offices are very important. It's a puzzle. When you put a puzzle together, if you've got 2 or 3 pieces missing, you're probably not going to win. And it's just something that's always, I love to learn even today. I try like crazy to learn today. I'm a huge reader. I like to read inspirational things, stories of people who have made a difference in the world. Presidents, some of our civil rights leaders, some of our impassionate leaders from other parts of the country, of the world. I love to read about them because if you look at them, they face similar obstacles that any athlete would have, but their odds were much less than what athletes would have today.
I'm 100% with you. I don't know if you can see behind me, but I have like a George Washington over there, Abraham Lincoln on my left side. These are, here, I'll show you. These are vintage sports cards from the 1950s of historical figures. And I'm 100% with you for that reason. I mean, when you look at, things like sports leagues, you got 300, 400, 500 guys. It was all on George to get this whole thing to work. So, you look back and you study those guys. It's so fascinating because of the pressure and, what a lot of those guys had to do. So I'm a huge history buff like yourself in that regard.
Well, we don't teach that enough, and we hardly even teach it today. But there's some really interesting stories about Lincoln and FDR, Roosevelt, Stalin, people who've been prominent in the changes in this world today. And I got through reading a book the other day on Thurgood Marshall and his attempt to become a Supreme Court member in 1956. It was a fascinating book, and how great he was as a person, and how against great odds, only because he was a Black man, that he persevered and became one of our greatest Supreme Court judges. And it's just amazing if you read the books about people like that who truly made a difference and helped change our country, which needs much more change than we have today. But we need leaders, and leaders are inspirational. Robert Caro, who was a New York native, he's written a lot of incredible books. He's written 2 or 3, a few on LBJ, fascinating books. Wrote a book on the building in New York City. I mean, he's an amazing writer, but there's so many writers out there that will focus on, you know, one president, one person. And I wish people would get kind of away from, you know, reading all the mysteries and all the thrillers and everything, because history, please teach our kids history today. Don't forget it, learn from it, but don't replicate it.
Totally. You know what's so funny about that? So right now I'm in the middle of reading Thomas Jefferson's biography by John Meacham. And I'm probably going to do Andrew Jackson's after that. But the thing is, like, I'm 20 now. When I was in high school, I didn't like history at all. You know, I didn't like any subject except for gym, truthfully. But afterwards, when it was presented to me in the context at which, you know, I actually would be able to consume and enjoy. For me, it was collecting things. So as I collected the cards and, you know, I have a signed presidential document by Abraham Lincoln from him appointing the postmaster general in, you know, 1852. It's like those things draw me in and get me to learn, you know, about all those sorts of things. So I think for everybody, it's just about it being much more individualized than, you know, sort of the school system allows. That's at least for me, you know, like these days what the problem was, but I love it now and hated it then. So to your point, it's really just about teaching it the right way.
Well, you know what's another interesting thing that's happened in my life. When you grow up in a little town of 500 and you don't have a whole lot to look forward to in your life, or at least think you don't, uh, to to know that I have spent time with a number of our presidents, and some of them who I really admire greatly. Um, I would never thought in my life that would have happened. Never thought. And it's just pretty special that I had a chance to spend time with those people when I'd already read about them, knew about them, and I watched them, you know, pillared and said horrible things about. And I remember when President Obama got elected, it's probably the happiest day of my life, because I thought America had come full circle then. And just meeting him and being around him, what a great guy he was, how classy he was. It was a lot of fun. And he's fun. Obviously, he's brilliant, smart. He's got a great way about him. And in that office today, we're trying to not get political, but we're certainly trying to do some things that are less than cooperative with all the members of our country, and particularly the position that America has in this world. It's a slippery, very slippery slope today. Very slippery.
Totally. Just the visual though of you going from, you know, adding a few seconds to your shot clock to hanging out with presidents of the United States it's pretty remarkable. I mean, that's the documentary right there.
Well, oh yes, it was. I feel blessed, to be honest with you. I feel blessed.
And Obama's a huge basketball fan too. And
Yes,
I don't know, how would you judge his jump shot? I know you've seen it.
Who, him? Well, you know, I haven't seen him shoot in person. I think seeing someone shoot in person is a lot more easy to do.
Okay.
But you know what? He loves it. He loves the game. He likes the. I like the fact that he's willing to talk a little trash with some of our players that he knows better than he certainly knows me.
That's funny. So I want to ask a very fun question. So speaking of all the collectibles and things like that, obviously you have some very famous cards. Your 1961 Fleer rookie card, I'm sure you've signed a ton of them, but I wanted to ask you, what do you think the most somebody has ever paid for a Jerry West basketball card is?
You know what? I don't know. And frankly, I don't really care, because I don't look at myself that way. I think it's just something that were promotional things for the league. And now, you know, people, when being shut in with all the COVID stuff. I think they're buying things and paying record prices for them that make no sense to me. That makes absolutely no sense to me. If I had one, I would give it to you. But I'm not a self collector. I've got a few things that are, I guess, pretty valuable because people want me to sell them, and I'm not going to sell them. I have no reason to sell them. And I think to myself, why should I give them away to some charity or something like that, where people can enjoy them, and maybe that day will come when they'll all go to West Virginia University when I'm no longer here.
That's awesome. Well, all that it means is that people love you, which is always, it's never a bad thing.
I'm not sure that if they knew me, maybe they have a different opinion, but I really do like people. I try to make time for everyone. And sometimes as a player, when you're being rushed and everything, it would just used to sort of irritate me that if kids would be waiting out there that you didn't have enough chance to sign them, but it's on to bigger and better things tomorrow night. So you were held up, but I do embrace people. I like all people, whether they like me or not, that's up to them. But I try to treat people the way I want to be treated. And, I think there's some people that I played against, I have incredible respect for, and some I had no respect. And again, when I say no respect, because they were kicking our fannies. But I think time changes a lot of things for me, and certainly have made me appreciate the opportunity to do something that I love to do. An old adage that I've heard for years, and it's so true. Find something you love to do, and you'll never work a day in your life. I've never worked a day in my life.
That's the best. I love that. And I also do love that you still have some of your memorabilia as well. That's,
You never know by living and being in my house. Never know.
yeah, no, I trust me, I believe you on that. I do think though, from a charitable standpoint, like some of this stuff is pretty incredible. Like what collectibles can raise for charities, for good causes, and things like that. Obviously, our mutual friend, Darren knows a lot about that.
Excuse me for interrupting, but I think the reason it would be awkward for me to do that, because people would say you need the money, and I don't, and but I have frankly no reason to have it. Some of the things are really interesting, and to think back to the times. I have a gold medal won by an amateur team with my jersey, the picture of a uniform on it. That's extremely valuable. And I'll never forget 1960 playing with an all amateur team. It was just the highlight of my professional, not professional, but my basketball career. Greatest honor ever to win a gold medal as an amateur for the USA.
That's incredible. I love that you still have the jerseys and medals and things like that. It's got to be fun to look back on, though. It brings back some memories and things like that.
Well, unless, some of my friends have passed away, and people I participated with and things. And every time they, someone who I was particularly close to and really cared for, you do start to reminisce about things. But, unfortunately, we can't live as long as we want to live, and as long as you're, as long as you're still viable and your brain still works, it's fun to be involved. But I would never do something that if I didn't think I was going to be able to contribute, or to make a contribution maybe to the growth of a young kid who needed some encouragement, who discouraged because everyone has rejected him. And rejection of someone who's pursuing a lifetime goal, let's say for an athlete, it's probably the harshest thing, because of all the time they spent, all the effort they spent. That's probably the most incredible rejection you could have. And that's when young kids need people around them to talk to them about it, and just understand that a lot of sports are highly specialized. And they don't all come from the USA today. Not at all. They come from all over the world. So what, 440 players play in the NBA, comprised of what, probably 20% European or
Yeah.
close to it. And more are going to come over here because I mentioned earlier, when you're young and you don't have anything to do and kind of aimless, and maybe a friend of yours takes you to a gym and you pick up a basketball, and there's people there that are pretty skilled and they watch them and they get motivated for it. So, and there's an incredible amount of financial reward today for players. You can make your life very secure. You can take care of people. You can give to charity things. You can support causes. All these things are important, particularly when kids are struggling and particularly when they're growing into the respective sports.
So I'm curious from a wider standpoint, the people that listen to this podcast are, all the way from 13 years old to upwards of 30, mostly interested in sports, obviously, but business as well. If you were to speak to, somebody like myself, 20-year-old who's, doing his thing in business and, just chasing their passion, what would your best advice to those people be?
Well, and I think when you're talking to anyone, you have to listen to them. Yeah, tell me your story and tell me what you're trying to accomplish or what you want to accomplish. You think of all the kids that go to college and some of the best colleges in the world, and they go there, they get their degree, and they never use their degree. Think about that.
And
Think of
that's
all
only
the
getting
thousands,
more extreme.
think
That's
of
why
all
I
the
skipped
thousands of
college.
dollars, okay, that they spend. It's because when you're young, I honestly wish that kids didn't have to go to college until they're about 20 years of age. I think they might, go out in the world a little bit and have maybe some kind of a different learning experiences. Maybe they work, some menial type job, and then you go home and study what has affected them. What do they feel good about it? Or is just a job? If it's just a job, you shouldn't be in it. And I think you need to whittle down what you want to try to accomplish in your life and in what field. That to me, my advice, as I say, find something you love, as I mentioned earlier, and go for it.
Never work a day in your life. That's
That's
it.
right. Absolutely.
Um, yeah, I think one of the things that I try to push to, especially people who are younger, just because what made a huge difference for me was internships when I was, in high school. And you can find them, there are now platforms like LinkedIn and things like that that can help you find opportunities like that, no matter who you are. But I think that having some of those work experiences, albeit short and sometimes during the summer in between high school years, like you said, just getting that experience is a game changer. And for me, it was the reason why I didn't even apply to college.
Yeah.
I had 540 kids in my graduating class, and I was the only person, not to go. But it was because of those internship experiences that showed me that, oh, there's they always call it like there's the real world, when you get out of college. But it's all the real world. We're all here doing our thing. So it's just about figuring out some sort of lane into that as early as possible. And like you did, going all in on it.
Well, I would, one of the things I would tell you, a lot of people are shy. And I was extremely shy. Hardly said a word when I went to college. And I think just the experience going to college, it made me open up to understand that a lot of people had a lot to say. You could choose your friends, but if you're interacting with people, let's say you were working in some drugstore, just some menial kind of summer job, the one thing it will help you to do is to deal with a lot of different people with a lot of different personalities, some gentle, some a little rough around the edges. And I think it helps you grow personality wise. You learn to accept that the world is not, everyone's not like you. And you should embrace that. That's one of the things I've always been attracted to people who are different when they're thinking. Their thinking motivates me sometimes, and other people who sound like they're on a recording every day, probably after a while, I'm tired of listening to that recording. I want someone that comes in today supplies information. I love information. I read the newspaper every day. They're getting thinner and thinner, by the way. So I try to read things that stimulate me, and to people who have motivated others and who have brought a different perspective into a lot of different jobs, a lot of different um, areas that I don't know anything about. And so that's, if somebody asks me and starts asking questions or talking about something, the first thing I will say after, if I find it intriguing, I'll ask them, where can I find out any information about this? I want to know why are you so interested in this? And why do you think has so much promise? And I've always been that way. I'm a very curious person. You're never too old to learn. And more importantly, appreciate, regardless of what age, appreciate what people say, even though it might not resonate with what you feel is right. Listen.
Hey, you're preaching, man. I'm 100% with you on all of that. You know, one of the things that I have tried to remind myself of is just that regardless of who you're talking to, they always know, you know, a lot that you don't. So being open-minded, no matter who it is, it could be a 5-year-old. They look at the world in a different way than you and I do. So just being open to everybody's perspective, because, you know, I think, I forget how the saying goes, but you know, the day that you think you know everything is the day that it's all over.
Well, that's when you when you think you know everything, you better lock yourself up and look in the mirror and examine yourself real well, because you don't. Some people, you know, working in an environment where there's a lot of stress, and winning in professional sports, because it creates so much negative talk. I mean, so much social media talk today that it's really distracting, really distracting. And I watch some of the commentary that these people make, and I hear people that are commentators, well, they should not have this guy on their team. These darn people, the reason they do it is to create controversy. That does not interest me at all. What's most important is to do the right thing and trust people that are hired by people. And I'm talking about sports. I see it all the time in sports, because it almost has become so important in this country that it's more important than other things that matter a heck of a lot more than a sports team. But I just think that let the people who own a team decide. Let them make the decision. The people they hire, let them make the decision. If they're not doing their job, replace them. That's the way this world is today. And you know, you see teams in the NBA have struggled for years, and you say to yourself, why? What? Because the system, to some respects, is about equality. They want everyone to be equal. I'm sure that they'd like a couple of super teams that win a lot of games, but if you're going to a game in, say, Memphis, Tennessee, and the New York Knicks come in town, and Memphis has a better team than New York, people in New York can't understand that. You have to get,
Fan, so I get you.
no, but I'm using that as an example,
Yeah.
because you're from New York. But just give credit to these other franchises, because they put this puzzle together and they've kept the puzzle going. The secret is to not just be a 1 or 2 year wonder, but preserve integrity of the franchise for over a number of years, be viable all the time. And you do that by having, you know, 2 or 3 young kids that are from, you know, 21 to or 19, even to 24. And then a bunch of guys in the middle there from 24 to 28, and some guys from 28 to 32. You need a balance to your team. And it's great to have all young players, but the system is not designed to be able to pay all those young players. It's not. And you have to decide early on, is this the group we want to keep, or do we want to let some of these guys or trade them? it's a balancing act. There's no question, and people don't give enough credit. Um, why does the number one pick in the draft fail? They have failed, what, 3 or 4 times. The number one pick in the draft, and everyone's supposed to be experts. Well, it shows that they're not experts. It's a best educated guess. And some people make the best educated guess on the parameters that they feel are important for their respective team.
Totally. And it's like in a lot of things, somebody being, marginally better at something, like a baseball player hitting the ball, 40 out of 1,000 times more than the next guy is the difference between Babe Ruth and somebody you've never heard of,
Well, that's right. Well, the other thing that's terrible is lots of people draft players and they'll know sometime within a year that the guy is not going to be what they thought. And they'll keep this guy around for 10 years to try to justify, a pick that wasn't what they thought they were going to be. Well, I think addition by subtraction, moving quicker than maybe you want to move him because you don't think he's going to work out. But everyone does it different. You can't fault any of them because you have to trust them for their expertise and knowledge, and also the fact that they're running a respective franchise.
Totally. No, it makes perfect sense. Well, I want to be respectful of your time. So, Mr. Clutch, thank you so much for doing this. This was an absolute pleasure.
Well, thank you very much, Buster. It's great to spend time with you. Continue good luck, and maybe we'll see you on ESPN or something here sooner or later.
Maybe. Thanks, brother.
My best. Bye-bye.